Silence may be a peaceful choice for you, but for the narcissist, it is an unrelenting nightmare. When you no longer argue, no longer cry, no longer react, they don't see peace, they see a rebellion. Your silence is not the end, it is the beginning of their psychological unraveling. Each stage they go through after your departure reveals a truth they've desperately tried to hide. They never truly controlled you. They only controlled your reactions. In today's video, we will dive deep into the layers of the narcissist's mask after you choose silence. From the initial shock to the silent regret, you'll clearly see that they didn't lose a lover. They lost a mirror reflecting the worth they never understood. If you're searching for answers, for validation, or simply for a reason to keep moving forward without looking back, stay with us until the end of the video. And don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because there are truths they don't want you to hear, but you deserve to know them. Now let's begin the journey of uncovering the truth behind your silence. Part 1. The invisible shock, when silence becomes the final blow. Silence, something seemingly small, holds more destructive power than any argument ever could. When you choose to withdraw in silence, with no accusations, no public tears, no final reaction, it doesn't make the narcissist feel forgiven. It leaves them confused, unsettled, and eventually afraid. Because in their world, you're no longer someone who's angry. You've become something they can't measure. In the narcissist's universe, everything revolves around feedback. They don't manipulate through brute force, but through emotional control. Every time you lashed out, they made a mental note. Every time you apologized for something that wasn't your fault, they felt triumphant. Every tense conversation was a chance for them to gauge their influence over you. But when you fall silent, fully, firmly, that is no longer a signal they can decode. It's a void they cannot command. They will try to interpret the silence. She's just mad, he's trying to manipulate me now, they'll come back eventually. But as time stretches and the silence remains, they begin to feel something they rarely confront: inner insecurity. At that point, you're no longer predictable, no longer someone they can provoke, no longer the person who responds just the way they expect. You've become an enigma, and that terrifies a narcissist. Your absence becomes a blank mirror. They begin to wonder, is this real this time? Have they truly let me go? Was my power over them ever real at all? And in that moment, you, the one they once saw as weak, as easily broken, become more powerful than ever. Because you didn't scream at them in frustration, you didn't write a long letter explaining why you left. You did one thing and one thing only. You walked away without a word. To you, it was an act of self-preservation. But to the narcissist, it was the ultimate form of defiance. When you choose silence, you dismantle the entire system they built, a system where you were always the reactor and they were always the director. But now, there's no stage, no audience, no script. They begin to replay their old tactics: texting, calling, posting cryptic messages online, pulling at shared memories to lure you back, all with one desperate goal: provoke a response. Because in the narcissist's mind, any reaction, even anger or hurt, means they still own a part of you. But when every attempt vanishes into the void, when every word and action is swallowed by your silence, that's when the true panic sets in. They don't understand what's happening. They once believed you would always come back, that you needed them to survive. They thought you were too fragile to leave for good. But now, your silence has shattered every false belief they ever held. And what they never expected was this: the one they deemed supply, the one they thought was easiest to control, would be the first to walk out of the script entirely. The narcissist's ego begins to crumble, not because you lashed out in bitterness, but because you gave them nothing. No argument, no confrontation, no lesson to teach them. You simply disappeared, completely, resolutely, and without seeking their validation. The truth is, in a narcissist's psyche, they don't fear being hated. They can handle anger, tears, even rebellion. What they are never prepared for is indifference. You've taken away the one thing they prized most: their ability to control your emotions. And there is no greater torment for a narcissist than realizing they no longer affect you. They can't hurt you, they can't draw you back in, they can't read you anymore. You've become unpredictable, and in the game of emotional control, that is what drives them insane. Instead of apologizing, they'll play the victim. Instead of backing off, they'll push boundaries. They'll try to trigger you any way they can. But with every second you remain silent, every minute you stay unbothered, you drive another stake through the illusion of control they spent so long crafting. And eventually they'll have to face the one truth that devastates every narcissist. You're gone, and you're not coming back. No dramatic farewell. No final tears, no grand ending, just one undeniable truth echoing in the silence. You have awakened. Part 2, the rage of the powerless, when fury has no one left to consume. Your silence is like a closed door that the narcissist cannot open, not with any of the keys they once used. They've tried texting, digging into memories, playing the guilt card, but when all of it is swallowed by your cold, unwavering silence, one explosive emotion begins to surface: rage. But this isn't the sorrowful rage of a broken heart. This is the fury of someone who feels their power slipping away. The narcissist isn't angry because you left. They're angry because you didn't leave on their terms. In their distorted reality, you were always theirs. You could complain, resist, even scream, but as long as you were reacting, you were still under their control. They lived under the illusion that they were the center of your emotional universe. And when you stopped, when you went completely still, the truth was revealed. They were never the center of anything but their own imagination. Being ignored is the narcissist's most primal fear. Their sense of existence depends on being mirrored by others. You were that mirror, the one that once reflected their sense of importance. But in your silence, that mirror vanishes. And what follows is not sorrow, it's fury. At this stage, you'll see them shift into attack mode. Criticism starts flooding in from all directions. She's too sensitive. He lacks empathy. I did everything, and they still weren't grateful. Narcissists cannot stand the feeling of being left behind because it forces them to face what they've long avoided: responsibility. Instead of introspection, they redirect. They don't ask themselves, what did I do to push them away? They ask, how dare you do this to me? They begin rewriting the story, casting themselves as the tragic protagonist. They will twist facts, fabricate events, and paint you as the villain, not because they believe it, but because they need others to believe it. It's fuel for their fragile ego. From mutual friends to social media, they launch a subtle smear campaign. But make no mistake, this is not the action of someone heartbroken by love. This is the instinctive reaction of an ego under siege. The narcissist isn't devastated because you no longer love them. They're devastated because you no longer fear them, no longer need them, no longer obey them. And that's why their rage often takes the form of psychological warfare. It's not always loud. It's the quiet whispers behind your back. She's emotionally unstable, he's controlling, I endured so much pain. All of it has one goal: to damage your credibility and hurt you indirectly, through the eyes of others. Narcissists are masters of the believable lie. They sprinkle in just enough truth to make their deception sound convincing. And sadly, some people will believe them. But here's what you must remember. The truth doesn't need to scream to survive. You don't have to refute every lie they tell. Your silence, if paired with consistent character, will speak louder than anything. Their rage will come in waves. It may start with cold indifference, escalate into explosive outbursts, and then shift into blame. One moment, they're begging you to come back, the next they're cursing you mercilessly. And sometimes they return with a sweet smile, pretending nothing ever happened. That isn't love. That's a tactic, a strategy to keep you dangling, never fully gone, never fully healed. As long as you're reacting, they still feel powerful. But the moment you stop responding, when you don't rise to defend yourself, when you don't flinch at the slander, that's when they feel truly powerless. And for a narcissist, that powerlessness is a kind of ego death. You extinguished their fire without using a single drop of water. You used peace, and that enrages them more than anything else. This rage doesn't stem from rejected love. It stems from the reality that you are no longer their puppet. You've chosen truth over their narrative, stillness over confrontation, yourself over a broken love that wasn't yours to fix. When the rage erupts, remember, it's not about you, it's about them. And each time they lash out and you don't react, you reinforce the most powerful message of all: I'm no longer playing this game. Part 3, the mask of regret, when an apology isn't remorse, but bait. After the rage has failed and the blame tactics no longer shake you, The narcissist doesn't simply give up. They won't stay silent for long. Instead, they enter a phase that is perhaps the most confusing for those who have been hurt, the performance of remorse. This is when they return, not with the same clenched grip of control, but with a new persona, soft, vulnerable, and seemingly genuine. You might receive a late-night message, a quiet "I'm sorry, I've done a lot of thinking," or an emotional confession like, "No one has ever understood me like you do." But this isn't awakening. It's strategy. The narcissist doesn't apologize because they've truly recognized their faults. They apologize because they realize they're losing you, and losing you means losing one of the most crucial emotional supplies they've ever had. They don't need love. They need submission, reactions, and most of all, the assurance that they still hold control. In moments of weakness, you may feel moved, especially when they tap into that place in you that still longs for closure, a sincere apology, or even just the acknowledgement that you once mattered. And that's exactly where they aim their arrow, at the most compassionate part of you. They don't reach for you with truth. They reach for you through memories. I just heard that song we used to play, "You're the only one who ever made me feel truly seen." These words are not meant to heal. They are sugar-coated traps. Beneath the softness still lies the same unchanging ego. They don't come back to love again. They come back to reestablish the power dynamic your silence just dismantled. What makes this stage so dangerous is that it can deceive even the strongest hearts. Not because you're weak, but because you once loved sincerely. You loved with a genuine heart, so when someone seems to be showing genuine emotion, you want to believe it. You want to believe the pain you endured had a purpose, that your leaving triggered change, that the tears you're seeing now are real, not props in another performance. But you must remember, real change doesn't happen because of loss. It happens because of awakening. And narcissists don't awaken, they adapt. They learn words like accountability, healing, and therapy. Not to apply them, but to reshape the image you hold of them. They may temporarily act gentle, non-controlling, even nurturing, but it's a strategic retreat, not true surrender. They haven't become better people. They've only dressed up as better people, so convincingly that even you might believe they've truly changed. They won't attack as before. They'll whisper. They'll write sweet words. They'll accidentally leave clues for you to notice, signs that they're thinking of you. But all of it has one purpose, to break your silence. Because all it takes is one response, even a simple, "Are you okay?" and they'll latch on like the door has reopened. But it's not a door to reconciliation. It's the doorway back into the cycle, where once again you become an actor in a script they wrote. You don't need to respond to prove forgiveness. You don't need to engage to show kindness. Kindness doesn't lie in enduring more pain. It lies in setting healthy boundaries. Someone who has truly changed won't use emotional tactics to pull you back. They'll respect the space you need. They won't rush your healing. They won't say, "I can't live without you." They'll say, "I understand if you never return." And here's a painful truth you need to see clearly. The narcissist doesn't regret hurting you. They regret losing someone who tolerated the hurt without leaving. When you walk away, they don't miss you. They miss the feeling of manipulating you without consequence. If you find yourself slipping and going back, don't blame yourself. But understand this. Any reaction at all is a confirmation that they still hold influence. They don't need you to love them again. They just need you to care again, just enough to react. That's all it takes to breathe life back into the control system you once dismantled. And that's why you must be cautious. Because when they return with love, what they really want isn't you. It's the chance to replay the same game, this time with more sophisticated moves. Don't fear your silence. Don't fear being called cold, because the cruelest thing you could do to your own heart is return to someone who never truly changed and ask it to sacrifice itself all over again. Part 4, the silent collapse. When there's no one left to control, the narcissist is left with themselves. Manipulation is loud, full of accusations, crocodile tears, and carefully crafted apologies. But collapse is different. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't scream. It gives no warning. When you hold your silence long enough, enduring the attacks, the nostalgic traps, and the fake remorse, you enter the space the narcissist fears most, the realm of complete emptiness. This is no longer a battle between you and them. This is the moment where they are left with no one but themselves, and that is exactly what causes their downfall. Throughout the relationship, you were the mirror through which they saw themselves exist. Somehow, through every reaction you gave, whether it was anger, hurt, or forgiveness, you gave them a sense of identity. But when you choose to no longer react, to no longer be present, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, they are forced to face what they never dared to confront. They are nothing without you. Without you, there is no emotional supply. No one left to test, to provoke, to manipulate. No accusations to play the victim to. No disappointed gaze to fake repentance for. No one left to control, so their power becomes meaningless. And it is in this moment that the walls they've built begin to crack. They may not cry. They may not beg. They may even laugh and post cheerfully on social media like nothing happened. But inside, there's a full-blown identity crisis. Narcissists don't collapse with noise. They collapse in silence, when they no longer know who they are without someone to define them. This is a terrifying unraveling, unseen, unheard, untouched. But it's real, deeply real. They may suddenly withdraw, disappear from social groups, stop posting, go cold on someone new. Or the opposite, they may leap into new relationships, clinging to others like a life raft. But no new connection can fill the void you left, because that void wasn't caused by your absence. It was caused by their inability to control you anymore. You are no longer the one to return to. You've become the one who stepped out of the circle. And that creates a kind of helplessness they've never encountered, because they always believed you would come back, because one way or another. Without you, they don't know who to perform for. No one witnesses their fabricated pain. No one pushes back for them to retaliate. No one believes the story they're desperate to spin. Every attempt becomes meaningless because the stage has lost its audience. And then something strange happens. They begin to wonder, did I lose something irreplaceable? Not from love, not from remorse, but from an existential panic. You were the core of their emotional operating system. And when you vanish without seeking their acknowledgement, they feel as though their internal compass has been destroyed. No more morning messages to react to. No more nighttime waiting for your heartbreak. Every manipulative habit suddenly becomes useless. And what terrifies them is not that you stopped loving them, but that you stopped needing them. They thought you'd need closure, that you'd come back for one last word. But when all you leave is silence, there's nothing left for them to control. And for a narcissist, losing control isn't just a failure, it's a collapse of identity. They might try to replace you. They might find someone new, seemingly better than you on the surface. But don't be fooled. The problem isn't you. The truth is, no one else will endure them like you once did. No one will reflect back the same raw emotion. And no one will disappear with the same power that you have. And that thought haunts them. They will see glimpses of you in others' eyes. They will hear your name in quiet moments. They will dream about you without knowing why. But they will never admit it, because narcissists don't say they're breaking. They simply break, silently. And you won't see it, unless you pay attention to their silence. Not the kind that comes from peace like yours, but the kind that comes from disarray, with no way out. If you've made it this far, if you've survived the pull, the rage, the fake repentance, then hold steady. Because right here in this stage, your strength has collapsed the entire manipulation system from within. You don't have to speak. You don't have to prove anything. Your absence at the right time with the right finality was the fatal blow. They can't control you anymore. They can't predict you anymore. And that is when they lose everything. Part 5, the distorted story. When the truth threatens their control, they create a new version. After every failed tactic, rage, pleading, false remorse, and silent collapse, the narcissist still doesn't let go. Because if they can't control you, they'll try to control the story about you. In their world, the truth is not something to be honored. It's something to be rewritten if it threatens the image they're desperate to protect. And the most dangerous truth of all is this. You walked away without hatred, without drama, without having to hurt them to reclaim your worth. You simply left with peace. And that can't be controlled, can't be twisted into a narrative that favors them. So they resort to the next best option, rewriting the story. In this new version, you are no longer the one who waited too long, not the one who forgave too much, not the one who endured quietly just to preserve the relationship. No, now you're the cold one, the selfish one, the emotionally unstable one. They're no longer the one who hurt you. They become the victim of abandonment. Why do they do this? Because if they accepted the truth, they would have to look inward. They would have to face the fact that they lost someone genuine because they were too addicted to control. And to do that, they would need courage and self-awareness, two things narcissists rarely possess. Instead, they choose the easier path: distortion. Gradually, the story morphs with deliberate edits. I gave it my all. They were always starting fights. I loved them, but they didn't appreciate it. These words are whispered into the ears of friends, family, coworkers, even new partners, all to achieve one goal: to restore the illusion that they are the one who deserves sympathy. This isn't just slander. It's a calculated strategy to salvage their image. They can't bear being left behind without explanation. So if you won't tell the story, they will. If you don't speak, they'll invent a voice for you, one carefully edited and colored to cast you as the perpetrator of injustice. You might start hearing hesitant questions from mutual friends. Were you being too distant? Did you really leave without saying anything? They said you were emotionally unstable. And that's when you realize a different version is being told, and you, the real you, are being replaced with a counterfeit. But remember this: truth does not need to be defended with a reaction. You don't need to go on a campaign to correct the narrative. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to break the peace you've built just to be understood. Because in the war between truth and illusion, time always sides with the truth. The story they tell may be believed at first. They may receive comfort, validation, and ego-soothing support. But over time, people start to notice the inconsistencies. They'll see that you are calm, silent, and composed, while the narcissist keeps explaining, seeking allies, telling and retelling. And the cruel irony for the narcissist is this: the story they created to erase you only makes people remember you more. Because you never had to scream, you didn't overreact, you let silence speak. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone who no longer needs to prove anything. As time passes, they will add more chapters to their tale. They'll cast themselves as the hero who overcame a toxic love. They'll post philosophical reflections on social media, share contrived lessons, and pretend to have healed. But if you listen closely, all you'll hear is a desperate attempt to cover the truth you left behind. You let them go with grace, something they were never strong enough to do themselves. They rewrite the story because the truth wounds their ego. They rewrite it because in the real story, they aren't the main character. You are. You are the one who was strong. You are the one who walked away with dignity. And the one thing they will never be able to rewrite, no matter how many versions, no matter how many words, is the echo of your silence that lives on in their mind. Because at the end of it all, they can change the script, they can distort the facts, they can perform for new audiences, but they can never erase what actually happened. You left, not because you didn't love them, but because you could no longer love within a lie. And that is the one chapter they can never delete. Part 6, the eternal haunting, when the one who's gone can never be forgotten. Some goodbyes sting for a while, then fade into the background. But there's a kind of departure that leaves a permanent mark, not because of drama, not because of hatred, but because the one who left was never truly understood. And your exit, silent and without accusation, without a dramatic final ending, is exactly what haunts the narcissist for years to come. Not because they loved you deeply, not because they woke up and realized you were the one. They are haunted because you are the only one they couldn't control, couldn't decode, couldn't define in their own terms. Among the many relationships they've cycled through, you were the exception. Others may have fought, cried, returned, still seeking healing, but not you. You didn't fight back. You didn't play the victim. You didn't return for closure. You simply disappeared and never looked back. That left them with a puzzle they couldn't solve. They don't know your reasons. They don't understand your silence. They don't know what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And not knowing is the very thing they cannot stand. In the narcissist's mind, you become an open-ended question with no answer. They see glimpses of you in new people. They compare every hug, every gaze, every reaction, but no one gives them that same sense of control they once felt manipulating you. And no one threatens their false power quite like your indifference. They begin replaying your story in their mind, looping it like an old film. But every time, the ending eludes them. Why didn't you react? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you need closure to walk away? The answer is simple. You grew. You no longer needed an apology to be free. You no longer needed anyone to validate your pain. You didn't need words because your silence was a complete statement, one no language could enhance. And that's why you remain with them. Not as a past lover, but as a memory they cannot control, cannot erase, cannot rewrite. They will try to replace you, quickly. A new partner, a new romance, a new image to show the world that they're fine. But the truth is this: you were never someone who could be replaced. You were a lesson they lacked the courage to learn. And that's why you become an obsession. Not because you were their greatest love, but because you were the first time they truly failed at manipulation. And for a narcissist, that kind of failure is a wound that never heals. They'll never admit it. They'll never tell a soul. They may still smile, still post, still play pretend. But in their quiet moments, in the emptiness that no new relationship can fill, your name will echo. An old message reread by accident. A song that brings you back. A fleeting memory that catches them off guard. And they'll remember, not because they want you back, but because they can't bear the fact that they once held you and lost you without ever understanding why. You didn't leave behind rage. You left behind awakening. You didn't scream, "I've had enough." You simply showed it through your absence. "I'm no longer here." And that is the loudest thing a survivor of manipulation can ever say. You became the unbreakable mirror in which they see themselves, raw, distorted, and with no one left to blame. You are the one who didn't need closure, didn't need validation, didn't need anyone to understand what you endured, because you understood one thing. Healing doesn't require an audience. It only requires one quiet, repeated choice each day. Don't go back. Don't seek a reason. Don't ask permission to move on. And that is why you've become the gentle ghost they can't erase. You are the chapter they never finished. You are the final line they never got to write. And they will keep telling the story their way, trying to soothe their ego. But with every retelling, they are forced to remember the truth they tried to escape. They lost the best thing that ever happened to them. Not because that person didn't love them enough, but because that person finally learned to love themselves more than a love that was never healthy. And that is something they will never know how to do. Part 7, The Walk Without Looking Back, When Peace Needs No Goodbye. Not all endings come with farewells. Not every chapter needs a dramatic goodbye to close. Some endings arrive in silence, yet echo endlessly in the mind of the one left behind. And when you chose to walk away without turning back, you didn't just end a relationship. You ended a cycle of pain and manipulation that had played on repeat for far too long. This wasn't an escape. It was a quiet act of growth. No need to prove, no need to explain, no need to justify why you had to go. Because deep down, you knew. You didn't leave because you hated them. You left because, for the first time in a long time, you chose to love yourself after losing pieces of your soul in a game of emotional survival they designed. Narcissists often believe you'll come back. They're used to unconditional forgiveness. They expect you to return after every push and pull, after every hurtful episode. They believe you need closure, an apology, or a proper goodbye. But not this time. This time you needed nothing from them. You've learned that in a healthy relationship, endings don't require a war. Sometimes leaving in silence is the kindest way to close a chapter that once bled pain. You didn't walk away with a broken heart. You walked away with a healed one, not because they healed you, but because you finally chose to begin your own recovery. When you turned your back without saying a word, it wasn't coldness. It was clarity. You no longer needed a reaction to feel validated. You had grown beyond needing recognition from someone who never truly saw you. You didn't need them to understand how deeply you hurt. You didn't need them to admit they were wrong. You didn't need them to witness how strong you'd become, because your silence said it all. They won't understand. They'll call you heartless. They'll say you walked away without hesitation. But they don't know this truth. Before you left quietly, you stayed in lonely silence for far too long. You once hoped they'd change. You once pleaded to be seen. You once spoke gently. You once cried alone. You once sacrificed your self-respect for something you thought was love. But in the end, the only thing you held on to was yourself. And that is more valuable than any relationship, the return to yourself. The narcissist won't understand why you're no longer angry, why you didn't send one last message, why you never asked for closure. But the truth is, closure didn't come from them. It came from within you. It came the moment you no longer waited for an apology, no longer needed someone to tell you that you were enough, no longer hoped they'd see what they lost. That is when you became truly free. Freedom isn't when they vanish from your life. Freedom is when their presence or absence no longer matters. You didn't leave to punish them. You didn't leave so they'd regret it. You didn't leave to prove a point. You left because you changed. And that change didn't come from them getting better or worse. It came from a deep decision. I will no longer live in pieces. You no longer want to win the argument. You no longer try to explain so they'll understand. You no longer believe your worth lies in being chosen. You no longer equate love with sacrifice that erases you. You may have once believed those things, but not anymore. You walk away, not because you ran out of love, but because you finally had enough awareness not to place your heart in a place where authenticity cannot grow. And that is the one thing the narcissist will never reach. They can mimic remorse. They can rewrite the story. They can find someone new. But they cannot do what you did. Let go of a toxic relationship, not out of hate, but because you finally learned how to love the right way. And that is why you no longer need to look back. The truth is, you didn't stay away because you're hard. You stayed away because you've become soft. And softness doesn't need a spotlight. Softness doesn't need applause. It only needs one steady step forward. Not for anyone, not to prove anything, but simply because you've chosen peace over fighting for something no longer worth the battle. Part 8, the silent waiting. When they don't let go, they just change their approach. Don't be fooled by their silence. Don't assume that just because they've stopped texting, stopped expressing remorse, stopped trying to reach out, they've given up. No. When it comes to the narcissist, silence is never surrender. It's just a temporary strategy. When they can't control you openly, they'll attempt to control you from the shadows. When emotional force fails, they'll try to slip through the smallest cracks. A memory, a moment of vulnerability, a seemingly harmless sign of concern. They know you've walked away. They saw the door close, but they didn't walk away. They're still there, waiting in silence. Not because they miss you, but because they still believe that one day you'll slip. Maybe it's a birthday message, an accidental like on one of their photos, a casual comment, or a polite reply. Any small gesture from you will be interpreted as proof. The game isn't over yet. To a narcissist, there's no such thing as the end. Silence is only a pause unless you are unwavering, leaving no signals to exploit. They don't long for you as someone they once loved. They long for the energy you gave them, the emotional power they once held when you still reacted, still hoped, still held on. They're not waiting for love. They're waiting to regain control. And when they can't lure you in with the usual tactics, anger, guilt, nostalgia, they'll get more sophisticated. No more floods of messages. Now it's a deliberate scene. A cryptic story meant only for you to decipher. A small action crafted to spark a single thought in your mind. Maybe they've really changed. That is the door they've been waiting for you to open. Narcissists don't change, they adapt. They know you've become wiser, stronger. So this time, they'll play it slow. They'll observe, they'll wait for you to soften, wait for you to wonder, maybe this time it's different. But the truth is, they're not coming back to love you. They're coming back to reclaim the power you took with you when you left in silence. And if you're not careful, if you think it's just one message, what harm could it do? Remember, that is the first crack in the wall you've worked so hard to build. They won't rush in. They'll wait for the crack to spread. And then they'll slip back in, not as someone new, but as the same manipulator with a polished, rewritten script. This time they might be softer, sweeter, more patient. But the core remains the same. They're not returning for you. They're returning for the feeling of owning you. And what makes you most vulnerable is the beautiful memories. You remember the sweetness, the laughter, the deep conversations, but you forget that those moments were just another phase in the manipulation cycle. When they were kind, it wasn't love. It was the pullback phase after they'd wounded you. And you must remember, people don't change just because they've been left. They change when they confront themselves and take responsibility. Narcissists don't take responsibility. They perform remorse to regain a role in your life. Don't confuse their silence with surrender. Understand this. You are the most threatening enemy they've ever faced, not because you fought back, but because you didn't. You didn't scream, you didn't chase, you didn't expose them. You simply disappeared and left behind a void they'll never be able to fill. And because of that, they never stop watching you. If not publicly, then silently. They're scanning for signs, looking for weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to restart the cycle. This is when you need to understand freedom doesn't come from one act of silence. It comes from repeating the decision not to go back every day, every moment, every time you feel weak. Freedom is when you see their name pop up and feel nothing. Freedom is when you revisit the past and no longer wish to fix it. Freedom is when your silence is no longer a tactic, it's your natural state. And when that happens, you haven't just left physically, you've reclaimed the power they once used to control you. And to a narcissist, that is the greatest punishment, one you never have to declare. Part 9, the silent regret, when the narcissist realizes they lost the best thing they ever had. There's a kind of regret that is never spoken, not because it doesn't exist, but because the ego is too big to admit something truly valuable was lost. And that is the kind of regret the narcissist is left with, after every attempt to control, manipulate, rewrite the story, and reel you back fails. When you not only walked away, but never came back. At first, they feel no loss. They fake being fine. They shrug it off. They rush into another relationship to prove you weren't special. But time is not on the side of pretense. When the novelty wears off, when their replacements fail to bring back that sense of power, an emptiness sets in. And in that emptiness, you return. Not loudly, but unmistakably. They miss you, but not the way someone misses a beloved partner. They miss the feeling of being seen by you, the patience you gave, the forgiveness you offered. They miss how you kept giving them chances, even when you were the one being hurt. They miss how you stayed, even when you had every reason to leave. And then they realize someone once loved them in a way they were never mature enough to reciprocate. They don't regret you out of love. They regret you because they lost someone who was genuine, and they'll never have that again. Others may come, prettier, more appealing, more normal, by their definition. But no one will ever make them feel completely accepted. No one will understand the darkness inside them without judgment. No one will endure their emotional storms and still search for the humanity beneath the mask of pride and coldness. They may have once mocked your gentleness, but now they see it for what it was, rare. And they destroyed it with their own hands. They won't say it out loud. They won't message you an apology. They won't write a heartfelt letter. Instead, they'll keep living, keep building normal relationships, keep pretending they've learned their lesson. But deep down, in the quiet moments, they know exactly what they lost. And what makes this regret the most painful is knowing they can never get it back. You walked away in awareness, not for revenge, not to prove a point. You left because you recognized your worth, and you could no longer allow it to be diminished. And that is what they never expected. They were used to your forgiveness, used to you returning after every rupture, used to being loved despite the damage they caused. So when you truly disappeared, silently but unwaveringly, that was the moment they faced a consequence they thought would never come. Narcissists never imagined that the weak one would one day become so strong that they no longer need them. And once they realize that, every old tactic becomes meaningless. And no apology is enough. No explanation is believed. No profession of love holds value anymore. Because for the first time, they're no longer the one who can summon you back. You've learned how to walk away without leaving a breadcrumb trail behind. And that leaves them paralyzed with regret. But they will never say it. Because to admit that you were the best thing they ever had would mean admitting they were the reason they lost it. And a narcissist doesn't know how to own their failure. They'll continue telling stories, continue playing the role of the healed one. But you know, and they know, real growth is not about words. It's about how someone treats what's precious when they still have it. And they lost you, not because you were perfect, but because you were real. They lost someone who saw both their light and darkness and stayed. They lost someone who loved not the version they showed, but the parts they tried so hard to hide. Now, all they have left is a memory, one they can't replace, can't recreate, and can never erase. You are the lesson they'll never be brave enough to teach themselves. You are the door they closed with their own hand, and now no key fits the lock. You are living proof that love cannot survive without kindness. And in the end, yes, they regret it, but they will never say it out loud. You didn't leave because you were cruel. You left because you awakened. In the end, this isn't just a story about a narcissist. This is a journey back to yourself. You didn't walk away to hurt anyone. You didn't go silent to win. You didn't leave to create distance. You left to rebuild boundaries, the ones you once sacrificed to keep an unhealthy relationship alive. The narcissist was never afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing control over you. And that's why your calm, not your anger, is what terrifies them the most. Without confrontation, without final words, you stepped out of the endless cycle of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal with one simple yet powerful act: silence, and never looking back. They may rewrite the story to make themselves look better, sound more reasonable. They may weave hundreds of justifications, tell thousands of versions of you to others, but they can never rewrite the truth that unfolded within you. The truth is, you forgave far too much. You gave more than you should have. You believed again and again. But one day you no longer needed another apology. You just needed freedom. Your silence isn't coldness, it's healing. Not everyone will understand that, and the narcissist never will, because they've never loved without conditions. They've never let go of anything they couldn't control. But you loved with everything you had. You endured more than anyone should, and eventually, you learned to love yourself more than anything else. If you're at that stage now, or somewhere along the journey of rediscovering who you are after a painful relationship with a narcissist, know this: you are not alone. Every firm choice you make today is a step toward inner freedom, a place where you no longer live to please anyone, but live to be fully yourself, whole, peaceful, and worthy. If this video resonates with a part of your story, please hit subscribe, tap the notification bell, so you never miss another message as we continue this journey of understanding, healing, and awakening together. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. We read and honor every story because you deserve to be heard. You deserve to be loved without sacrificing who you are, and you deserve to walk away without ever needing to look back.